The Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross. Book the First, which treats of the night of sense. Stanza the first. On a dark night, kindled in love with yearnings, oh, happy chance! I went forth without being observed, my house being now at rest. Exposition. In this first stanza, the soul relates the way and manner which it followed in going forth, as to its affection, from itself and from all things, and in dying to them all and to itself, by means of true mortification, in order to attain to living the sweet and delectable life of love with God. And it says that this going forth from itself and from all things was a dark night, by which, as will be explained hereafter, is here understood purgative contemplation, which causes passively in the soul the negation of itself and of all things referred to above. And this going forth, it says here, that it was able to accomplish in the strength and ardor which love for its spouse gave to it for that purpose, in the dark contemplation aforementioned. Herein it extols the great happiness which it found in journeying to God through this night, with such signal success that none of the three enemies, which are the world, the devil, and the flesh, who are they who ever impede this road, could hinder it, inasmuch as the aforementioned night of purgative contemplation lulled to sleep and mortified, in the house of its sensuality, all the passions and desires with respect to their mischievous desires and motions. The line then says, on a dark night. Chapter 1 sets down the first line and begins to treat of the imperfections of beginners. Into this dark night souls begin to enter when God draws them forth from the state of beginners, which is the state of those that meditate upon the spiritual road, and begins to set them in the state of progressives, which is that of those who are already contemplatives, to the end that after passing through it, they may arrive at the state of the perfect, which is that of the divine union of the soul with God. Wherefore, to the end that we may the better understand and explain what night is this through which the soul passes, and for what cause God sets it therein, it will be well here to touch first of all upon certain characteristics of beginners, which, although we treat them with all possible brevity, will not fail to be of service likewise to the beginners themselves, in order that, realizing the weakness of the state wherein they are, they may take courage, and may desire that God will bring them into this night, wherein the soul is strengthened and confirmed in the virtues, and made ready for the inestimable delights of the love of God. And although we may tarry here for a time, it will not be for longer than is necessary, so that we may go on to speak at once of this dark night. It must be known, then, that the soul, after it has been definitely converted to the service of God, is, as a rule, spiritually nurtured and caressed by God, even as is the tender child by its loving mother, who warms it with the heat of her bosom, and nurtures it with sweet milk and soft and pleasant food, and carries it and caresses it in her arms. But as the child grows bigger, the mother gradually ceases caressing it, and hiding her tender love, puts bitter aloes upon her sweet breast, sets down the child from her arms, and makes it walk upon its feet, so that it may lose the habits of a child, and betake itself to more important and substantial occupations. The loving mother is like the grace of God, for as soon as the soul is regenerated by its new warmth and fervor for the service of God, He treats it in the same way. He makes it to find spiritual milk sweet and delectable in all the things of God without any labor of its own, and also great pleasure in spiritual exercises. For here God is giving to it the breast of his tender love, even as to a tender child. Therefore such a soul finds its delight in spending long periods, perchance whole nights, in prayer. Penances are its pleasures, fasts its joys, and its consolations are to make use of the sacraments and to occupy itself in divine things. In the which things spiritual persons, though taking part in them with great efficacy and persistence, and using and treating them with great care, often find themselves, spiritually speaking, very weak and imperfect. For since they are moved to these things and to these spiritual exercises by the consolation and pleasure they find in them, and since, too, they have not been prepared for them by the practice of earnest striving in the virtues, they have many faults and imperfections with respect to these spiritual actions of theirs. For after all, any man's actions correspond to the habit of perfection attained by him. And as these persons have not had the opportunity of acquiring the said habits of strength, they have necessarily to work like feebler children, feebly. In order that this may be seen more clearly, and likewise how much these beginners in the virtues lack with respect to the works in which they so readily engage with the pleasure aforementioned, we shall describe it by reference to the 7 capital sins, each in its turn indicating some of the many imperfections which they have under each heading, wherein it will be clearly seen how like to children are these persons in all they do. And it will also be seen how many blessings the dark night, of which we shall afterwards treat, brings with it, since it cleanses the soul and purifies it from all these imperfections. Chapter 2. Of certain spiritual imperfections which beginners have with respect to the habit of pride. As these beginners feel themselves to be very fervent and diligent in spiritual things and devout exercises, from this prosperity, although it is true that holy things of their own nature cause humility, there often comes to them through their imperfections a certain kind of secret pride, whence they come to have some degree of satisfaction with their works and with themselves. And hence there comes to them likewise a certain desire, which is somewhat vain, and at times very vain, to speak of spiritual things in the presence of others, and sometimes even to teach such things rather than learn them. They condemn others in their heart when they see that they have not the kind of devotion which they themselves desire, and sometimes they even say this in words, herein resembling the Pharisee, who boasted of himself, praising God for his own good works, and despising the publican. In these persons the devil often increases the fervor that they have, and the desire to perform these and other works more frequently, so that their pride and presumption grow greater. For the devil knows quite well that all these works and virtues which they perform are not only valueless to them, but even become vices in them. And such a degree of evil are some of these persons wont to reach, that they would have none appear good except themselves. And thus, in deed and word, whenever the opportunity occurs, they condemn others and slander them, beholding the mote in their brother's eye, and not considering the beam which is in their own. They strain at another's gnat,